There is no fear as potent as the fear of the unknown. No monstrous visage discovered yet has been as terrifying as the infinite potential for horror which exists before the mask is removed. That is why we humans, in our naive misunderstanding of the universal order, are gripped by the mortal fear of death. We think it the final frontier, the greatest unimaginable unknown from whose penumbral shores no traveler may return. And so we cling desperately onto even the most dreary and anguished lives, suffering any known evil over our release into the beyond. But death is not to be feared, because death is very well understood. We have witnessed it, caused it, measured and recorded it to the last dying spasm of neuronal flickering. Even as I lay dying, it seemed silly to me that I should be afraid of the emptiness that reason promised to expect. I was dead. I wouldn't be capable of experiencing anything, so fear still had no cause. That thought brought me great comfort as I felt the erratic struggle from my heart against the inevitable conclusion I approached. It wasn't until I was finally drifting off to sleep that a final, intrusive doubt bubbled in my brain. What if it isn't death that is to be feared? What if it is what lies beyond? And so troubled did I slip beyond the mortal understanding, stepping into a world as far forsaken by reason as I now know from life. I was still in the hospital room, but the bustle of nurses and the beeping machines lost their opacity. As though I was mired in swiftly descending dusk, it seemed as though every sound was an echo of what it once was, every sight of reflection. With each passing moment, the world was becoming less real. But all that sight and sound, all that being, it wasn't simply disappearing. It was transforming into a figure beside me. The less real my room became, the more real the figure was, until presently it existed in such sharp actuality that nothing besides it seemed real at all. His cloak was black, not the color black, but its essence. It was as though seeing a tiger after a lifetime of looking at a child's crude drawing and thinking that's all a tiger was. Reality flowed around his scythe like a brush through watercolors, and I could see each elementary particle and time itself sundered across its blade. Surely this, I thought, this is why we're taught, without words, to fear death. I clutched at my hospital blanket to cower from the intensity of the Reaper's presence, but the once soft cotton now flowed like translucent mist through my hands. I knew at that moment that nothing could hide me from the specter's grasp, for he was the only real thing in this world. You were late. They weren't words. My head ached from the strain of this knowledge, as my lateness was burned into my awareness, imparted like an inescapable law of physics, as unequivocal as gravity. We don't have time for the usual speech. Hurry, now. I felt swept up around him like dirt in a hurricane. Before I knew what was happening, we were outside the hospital, moving at such frenzied pace that the world around me blurred into a dizzying tunnel of flashing light. If you're lucky, it will have gotten bored of waiting for you. I had too many questions, all fighting for attention in the forefront of my brain, without any making their way out. You're quiet. I admire that. Usually people ask too much. What's the point, I asked. My voice felt flat and dead compared to his overwhelming substance. How can I try to comprehend something so beyond mortal knowledge? You can't, but it's still human nature to ask. We weren't slowing. If anything, our pace was increasing. I wasn't running, flying, or anything of that nature. It was more like the rest of the world was moving around us, while we stood still. Vagueness and a heavy damp smell made me guess that we'd gone underground, but I couldn't say for sure. One question then I asked, what else is here besides? And that is why questions are pointless. Death is not a place or person. It's all there is. A troubling thought, but made more so by the growling howl, which began reverberating the rocks around me. We still seemed to be descending into the earth, and the air was growing warmer and denser now. The sound continued to mount, as though the world itself was suffering. Then what is it? What I'm here to protect you from. The rock split from the flash of his scythe, and the ground opened further into a sprawling cavern, dominated by a subterranean lake. But I thought you said you were all there is. No, I said death was all there is. We weren't moving any longer. Light glinted off the scythe from some unseen source and streamed into the lake like a tributary. Once inside, the light didn't reflect or dissipate, but swirled and danced like luminescent oil. I thought you were death. Death is not a person. The light was taking a life of its own inside the water. The still surface began to churn with the enigmatic energy. It took my scattered mind a long while to realize that I was the energy flowing into the lake. I felt tangled up with the figure, but we now existed as a beam of light boiling into the water. I knew I wouldn't understand, but that didn't stop me from feeling frustrated. If death is all there is, then what is it? What was waiting for me? The water pressed in around me, and I couldn't speak, although I could still draw breaths somehow. It is here. Something was in the water around me. Hands grabbed me by the legs and began dragging me downward. I was amazed to even discover I had limbs again. They felt so alien to me that it was almost as though this body was not my own. Light flashed from the scythe. Then again, the hands let go, and the howling rose once more. The Reaper was fighting something, although I couldn't make any sense of the battle except for the madness of thrashing water. The howling earth reached its crescendo, and the screams made the water around me convulse and contract like living fluid. Had the Reaper cut it? Was I safe? I began to explore my new body in the water, but just when I thought I was beginning to gain control, the hands clutched me once more. I lurched downward, struggling in vain against their grip. What is here? I tried to shout out against the suffocating liquid. What is happening? But I couldn't sense the Reaper's presence any longer. The heat was unbearable, but the cold depths the hands were dragging me toward were even worse. I became aware of the blinding light at the bottom of the lake, and though I struggled, the hands dragged me inexorably onward. I'm sorry. I couldn't fight it off. It seemed to be coming from so far away now. We will try again next time. The pressure, the heat, the noise, the hands dragging me into the blinding light. I closed my eyes and screamed. I was free from the water now, but I just kept screaming. I couldn't bear to look at it. Whatever had stolen me, whatever was death but wasn't, whatever even the Reaper could not defeat. The words spoke, real human words, from a real human mouth. My senses were so distraught that I couldn't make sense of them, but I'm guessing they were something like, "Congratulations, he's a healthy baby boy. Most people can't remember the day they die." or the day they were born. I happen to remember both, and I know that they are the same. The detailed version is a bit longer, if you'll hear me out, as I even question what it was that I most definitely saw that night. I promise this is not a no-sleep BS. If it sounds like a story, it's because I've told it so often, and I'm also excited to post it here after reading very similar accounts that now only seem to support what I saw as a phenomenon. When I was very young, my mom was still a dog breeder of Cocker Spaniels. It was the summer between kindergarten and first grade, the very early 80s. Not sure when anymore because I started kindergarten earlier than most. One of the Cocker Spaniels had just had puppies. She was notoriously a very high-strung dog who was a horrible mother. I'm not sure if she would smother, carelessly injure, or ignore her pups, but for that reason, the pups were kept away from her after they were fed and put in a laundry basket with a heating pad on low and a towel for the night. Me being a kid, and they being puppies, I begged my mom to keep the basket in my room that night. The basket of pups was placed in front of my door to hold it open with a night light nearby. As a kid, I needed a night light, and I also had to have my door open. Fear of the dark and being trapped in it, I guess. I fell asleep to the whimpers of the newborn pups and the sound of the pump in my fish tank. Nothing out of the ordinary at that time. At some point, I awoke in the middle of the night to the frantic squeals and cries of the puppies, but they sounded tiny, distant, like in a tunnel or across a warehouse from me. Even my fish tank sounded off, like my ears were blocked by sinus pressure. I rolled over to check on them or to go get my mom, but there was something crouched near the basket. At first, I thought it was my mom. I think I even asked, "Mom?" It was dark, hunched over, squatting near the laundry basket. What I thought was Mom's nightgown, was just a black garment draped over it. The thing's back was to me. The nightlight didn't even illuminate it. If anything, it was smoky and translucent, like ink in the water. When I spoke to it, it turned around toward my bed, and I saw a skull in the black shape where a head should be. It had red dot for eyes. Sometimes I remember them empty and black, but I knew it looked right at me. I swear its jaw snapped open, maybe surprised I saw it, or to scare me. It worked. I screamed. I screamed for my mom in the room just next door. It sounded like my screams went nowhere. Looking back now, I think the whole room was in a bubble of time or sound so this thing could do whatever it was doing. The thing pulled back from the basket and spun around, the skull in a cloak, like it was on all fours. But I didn't see the hands on the ground, and it started coming towards me, working its jaw. I remember it grinning. I remember it hanging open. It skittered across the 10-12 feet from the door to my bedside. I hid under my blanket. That's all I remember. I guess I passed out. When I woke up, I ran straight to my mom and told her everything, furious as to why she didn't save me. She said she didn't hear a peep, apologized, and tried to calm me. I drew a picture of the cloaked skull sitting beside the basket to describe what I saw. At this point in my life, I had never seen Reaper iconography. I had no idea what I was drawing. I knew what a skull was, but that was the extent of my death knowledge. She kept the drawing in her jewelry box, and later, a Bible. It's since been long lost. Flash forward years later, I'm probably 10, and I see my first depiction of the classic Grim Reaper in the art, on the cover of an old Hitchcock short story paperback. It blows my mind. Besides the scythe, it's the closest thing to what I saw. I go back to Mom, flabbergasted, to again show her what I saw. At this point, I guess she thinks I'm old enough to be told that 3 puppies had died that night, and she removed them before I woke up. But that was in the sunny morning, not the night. She admits she believes I saw something, and she had no explanation for what it was, and that there are things we just don't understand. So now I'm an adult, and I've been pretty skull and death obsessed ever since. I still believe in the paranormal, but have no other encounters. There was even a period around 10 to 12 where I talked to the darkness in my room, trying to bring it back so I could ask it questions. It never returned. When I was in my senior year of high school, around 2006, a few friends of mine and myself decided to go to a concert in San Jose, California. We had a great time in which we ingested no alcohol or drugs, and afterward were driven back to our lodging place by a friend's father. On this ride home, we happened to pass by a mostly unlit city park, being that it was about 1 a.m. For such a large city, it was surprisingly quiet that night. Nobody was really on the road or out and about. It was rather dark and peaceful out. Our vehicle came to a stop sign along the city park, and as we rolled to a halt, I glanced out the window to my right, and then looked back, ahead. Wait, was there something unusual that I spotted at the corner of my eye? I looked back, and sure enough, there is something unusual in that park. It's a white Grim Reaper. I mean, it's an honest-to-God Grim Reaper. It seemed like time slowed down for a minute. It was dressed in white garb, a black shadow engulfing the opening of the hood, and it was just sitting there on the park bench. I remember it being rather tall, too, maybe 6'4". If it had been standing, it had its hands folded over its lap, and seemed to be looking downward. Time sort of caught up to me after that. I had taken it all in, and returned to normal speed. I didn't say anything at first. A few seconds after I saw the White Reaper, our vehicle continues past the stop sign, like nothing happened. After we had driven about a block, I broke the silence and asked, no one in particular, "Did you see that? The white figure?" "Yes." Suddenly, chaos breaks out within our vehicle. Everyone freaking out, explaining what they saw, and urging my friend's dad to drive faster to get away from the thing. Everyone but the driver and one other passenger saw it, and saw the same thing as the next person. 4 of us saw the White Reaper, and all 4 of us experienced the same sensation of time slowing down, and all 4 of us thought we were going crazy. Sometimes when I think back on it, I wonder if I made it up. I wonder if my imagination got the best of me. But I'll occasionally ask one of my friends who is present if he or she remembers what we saw that night in San Jose, and they are quick to recite precisely what we saw. I'm not alone in my craziness, at least.